Elizabeth Ortel, and for the next half hour, I'll be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Misconduct allegations could endanger drug convictions. Lawsuit and depositions involving management of the Niagara County Forensic Lab include claims that the former director, the sister of a prominent state senator, engaged in harassment, unprofessional behavior, and conduct that could compromise criminal cases. In a lawsuit, 2 former employees of the Niagara County Forensic Lab have accused a former director of mismanagement and misconduct that legal experts say could compromise criminal convictions that relied on lab's analysis. The plaintiffs, a father and daughter, claim Corey Ort-Gowers, the sister of State Senate Minority Leader Robert Ort, harassed and defamed them over a 2-year period, compelling one to quit and the other to retire early. The father, Thomas DeFonso, claims Ort-Gowers turned on him after she pushed him to certify a lab chemist to do forensic drug analysis for criminal cases. DeFonso refused because he believed the chemist lacked sufficient training at the time. She was cleared to do the work anyway, according to DeFonso. He said he alerted his superiors in the sheriff's office to the analyst certification issue as early as March 2020, but nothing was done. That revelation, if true, could compromise hundreds, perhaps thousands, of local drug cases, according to legal experts. This could certainly affect the criminal convictions of a large number of defendants, especially those who went to trial. Anthony O'Rourke, a University of Buffalo law professor who specializes in criminal procedure, told Investigative Post. Ort-Gowers is also accused of engaging in sexual relationships with one or more law enforcement officers who brought casework to the lab, as well as an Erie County forensics expert, according to depositions taken for the lawsuit. DeFonso claims Ort-Gowers ordered him to expedite work for those officers. Attorneys for the defendants, Ort-Gowers, Niagara County, and the Niagara County Sheriff's Office, have denied any wrongdoing and inappropriate relationships. One judge has already recused himself from hearing the case based on the allegations made in the lawsuit and depositions. The plaintiff's attorney, Kristen Civiletto, says in court papers that her client's allegations are supported by depositions taken as part of the lawsuit and by audio recordings of meetings between lab employees and their superiors in the sheriff's office. The plaintiffs also point to text messages between Ort-Gowers and lab employees in which the lab director said she would make sure DeFonso gets forced into retirement, and describes her brother's political clout and friendship with Niagara County Sheriff Michael Filicetti. Much of that material has been under seal, labeled Attorney's Eyes Only, a designation the plaintiffs are challenging in court this month, citing the highest considerations of public interest in the integrity of the lab's work. Plaintiffs contend that they were asked to rush cases for officers with whom defendant Ort-Gowers was having a sexual relationship. Civiletto wrote in a partially redacted email supporting declassification of evidence in the case. In the email and in other court documents, Civiletto suggests Filicetti admitted in a December deposition that the allegations were serious. The fact alone is the public's business. None of this information can be kept confidential. State Supreme Court Justice Mario Giacobbe in October recused himself from hearing the case. He cited the plaintiff's allegation that Ort-Gowers engaged in an interpersonal relationship of a non-forensic nature with officers submitting evidence. He said some of those officers have appeared and likely would continue to appear to give testimony in his courtroom. The judge also noted that Ort Gowers is alleged to have had an intimate relationship with a member of Erie County's crime lab, with whom Giacobbe had a professional relationship before becoming a judge when he was an Erie County prosecutor. Ort Gowers and defense counsel have denied any impropriety. The lawsuit is now before State Supreme Court Justice Frank Sedita, a former Erie County District Attorney. Sedita is slated to hear arguments on January 27th about unsealing the depositions and other evidence that so far have been kept from public view. Civiletto and Sedita said Sedita has indicated he will not consider recusing himself on the same grounds as Giacobbe. The plaintiffs previously asked that the case be moved to a court outside Niagara and Erie counties. That request was denied. Sedita also will consider whether Civiletto can depose Ort Gowers' brother, the state senator, whose political protection she invoked during her tenure as lab director. Civiletto subpoenaed Ort in September. The defendant's attorneys last month moved to quash the subpoena. Ort, the state senator, refused an interview request. We maintain that the senator's office has no involvement in this matter and have no further comment. A spokesperson from Ort's office told Investigative Post in an email. Harvey Sanders, Ort Gowers' attorney, told Investigative Post his client was not interested in an interview and would have no comment beyond the arguments presented in court papers. Attorneys representing Niagara County and Sheriff Filicetti, also defendants in the lawsuit, said their clients do not agree to an interview and generally do not comment on the specifics of active litigation. I think we will prevail in this case based on the facts that will become apparent, Filicetti told Investigative Post, and I'll leave it at that. That leaves the court papers. Though much is under seal or heavily redacted, the available documents tell a troubling story. DeFonso had worked 20 years as a forensic drug chemist for the Niagara County Forensics Lab when Ort Gowers was hired as director in May 2017. Lauren Rogers, DeFonso's daughter, was hired as a firearms expert and drug chemist the same month as Ort Gowers, who previously worked for the Erie County Crime Analysis Center doing DNA analysis. DeFonso, in court papers, said he and his daughter got along well with the new director until July 2019, when Ort Gowers asked DeFonso to sign off on the training certification for Lindsay Klubeck, a lab chemist. The certification would permit Klubeck to analyze and identify controlled substances, cocaine, fentanyl, marijuana, and the like. He refused, maintaining that Klubeck was not adequately trained in the discipline. Her training binder comprised 3 pages of documented training cases, whereas Rogers, already certified as a drug chemist, had more than 500 pages in her training binder. The relationship immediately went south. For the next 2 years, according to the lawsuit, Ort Gowers waged an unrelenting and malicious campaign of harassment directed at DeFonso and Rogers. According to the DeFonso and Rogers, Ort Gowers set unreasonable deadlines for work assigned to them, but not for other employees, gave them conflicting directives verbally and by email, then held them accountable to whichever of the contrary directives they failed to meet. Also sought opportunities to criticize or embarrass them in front of other staff members. Enlisted lab staff to spy on DeFonso and try to catch him doing something wrong. Told female employees that DeFonso hated women and opposed their hiring, and had claimed a female lieutenant was promoted to captain only because she provided sexual favors to the management. Regularly referred to Plaintiff DeFondo as the asshole and Plaintiff Rogers as the entitled little bitch. Klubeck and another lab employee, Michelle Scotland, would later corroborate DeFonso and Rogers' harassment complaints, first in statements given to sheriff's officials, then in depositions for the lawsuit. Along the way, Ort Gowers badmouthed DeFonso and Rogers to co-workers, often in person, but also in hundreds, perhaps thousands, of text messages, according to the lawsuit. In those texts, the lab director conveyed her disdain for them. Ort Gowers would later delete texts like those from her phone, but Scotland and Klubeck kept them and provided them to DeFonso and Rogers for their lawsuit. According to the complaint, Ort Gowers frequently announced that she was untouchable because of her brother's political clout and friendship with the sheriff. She told staff her brother would direct state money to the lab and may run for governor, so the administration, including defendants, would do what she wanted. In March 2020, DeFonso met with Niagara County Sheriff Deputy Chief Patrick Weidel to discuss his problems with Ort Gowers. DeFonso told Weidel about the issue with Klubeck's certification. Weidel dismissed DeFonso's concerns as a difference of opinions and told him to try to get along. That fall, Ort Gowers gave DeFonso the first negative job performance review of his career. This prompted another meeting with Weidel and other officials, this time with Ort Gowers in attendance. According to the complaint, the lab director admitted in that September 2020 meeting she had lied in her written reprimand of DeFonso. In May 2021, Ort Gowers began requesting that certain officers' drug cases be given priority over the rest of the sheriff's forensic laboratory's caseload, according to the complaint. After DeFonso asked why Ort Gowers was accepting drug evidence directly from those officers in her office, a departure from past practice, the lab director installed paper over the windows to her office so that nobody could see inside when she had a visitor. Banished to the gun range. In June 2021, Ort Gowers gave Rogers her first negative job performance review, citing a failure to meet a work deadline. Her punishment? Ort Gowers moved Rogers' desks into the firearms room, where guns are fired to perform ballistic tests, creating a toxic environment with lead in the walls, ceilings, and floors. Sheriff Filicetti, Under Sheriff Michael Dunn, and Weidel, the deputy chief, all reviewed and approved the recommended punitive action, according to the complaint. Rogers gave her 2 weeks' notice on August 9, 2021. Before she left, according to the complaint, an angered Ort Gowers threw files at Rogers and told her that if she ever became pregnant, she would force her to stay in the firearms room and continue to fire weapons, continuing her exposure to lead and noise. Shortly thereafter, DeFonso filed his retirement papers. He told co-workers he'd planned to work another 5 years. DeFonso did not want to retire early and leave a long and distinguished career, but he had been driven to the point where no reasonable person could withstand the abuse and harassment, according to the complaint. On September 3, 2021, Klubeck and Scotland met with their superiors in the sheriff's office, along with a union representative and labor attorney for the county. In the recorded conversation, they confirmed Ort Gowers' 2-year campaign of harassment under DeFonso and Rogers, described the dysfunctional atmosphere she'd fomented in the lab. They also told their bosses about Ort Gowers expediting casework for select law enforcement officers. The sheriff's office then launched an internal investigation, interviewing other lab employees and Ort Gowers. On September 17th, facing the possibility of misconduct charges, Ort Gowers resigned. In July 2022, DeFonso and Rogers filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging they'd been punished for speaking up about serious improprieties that threatened the integrity of the criminal justice system in Niagara County. That First Amendment-based complaint was dismissed in February 2023. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The current lawsuit was filed in state court that July, this time arguing workplace harassment and defamation. Attorneys for Ort Gowers, the sheriff, and Niagara County issued blanket denials of nearly every allegation made against their clients, according to a Niagara Gazette report. Sanders, Ort Gowers' attorney, described the plaintiff's claims about his client as nothing more than conjecture and imagined motives. Much of the action in the case for the past year and a half has related to the confidentiality of audio recordings and transcripts, as well as the text messages between Ort Gowers and other lab employees. As previously reported in the Gazette, Niagara County officials maintained some of the material should remain confidential because they were obtained as part of an internal investigation into a personnel matter. The aftermath? Mark Shaw, a veteran forensic scientist with expertise in chemical and ballistics analysis, came out of retirement to serve as interim lab director after Ort Gowers resigned. Klubeck was named supervisor of the lab's controlled substances section after DeFonso retired. Shaw wrote a letter in November 2021 addressed to whom it may concern, saying he'd reviewed Klubeck's training binder and was satisfied she had completed the necessary criteria to analyze these drugs. But questions remain about the lab's operations under Ort Gowers' tenure. In March 2023, a year and a half after Ort Gowers resigned, the New York State Commission on Forensic Science notified the lab of 8 violations, including misrepresentation of information, fabricating and backdating training documents, and conduct unbecoming of a laboratory, according to a Niagara Gazette report. The following month, DeFonso gave testimony at a special hearing of the Commission, which oversees forensic labs across the state. DeFonso, in an affidavit, said he told the Commission he never signed off on Klubeck's training binder because she was not trained. He told them he was the only person in the lab at the time who had the credentials to sign off on her certification. After that hearing, the Commission sanctioned the lab for various failures, including poor record keeping and failure to operate independently, particularly in the instance where a lab's administration is also a customer of the lab. The sanctions letter offered a corrective action plan that included hiring a quality assurance manager and an outside consultant to review the lab's casework, as well as ethics training for all relevant parties. A copy of Klubeck's training schedule submitted to the court shows beginning and end dates for the drug training in question, but no initials from a supervisor verifying she'd completed the work. All the other training fields in the schedule have been initialed. O'Rourke, the UB law professor, said he worked on cases as a federal defense attorney in which questions about lab work led to acquittals. Here, he said, the quality of Klubeck's work might not matter. What matters is whether prosecutors at the time told the court she had professional qualifications that might not have been properly awarded. If that person doesn't have the expertise that they have held themselves out to have in court, then that would certainly allow a reasonable juror to doubt the strength of their testimony, he said. Whether convictions might be reopened or even reversed depends on how critical the analyst's lab work and testimony were to the guilty verdict. Christine Bartholomew, a UB law professor with expertise in evidence handling, told Investigative Post. She said a defense attorney informed of the certification issue would have had a field day on cross-examination, sowing doubt about the reliability of the analyst's testimony and lab work. It's logical that in some of those cases that testimony was really pivotal, and you're now foreclosed a line of questioning that a defense attorney would have been entitled to have, she said. If you and I were standing trial for a crime, these are questions we would want our attorney to be asking about someday who generated a report that's being used against us, right? More on the Big Brother act at Wegmans. The story of Wegmans snooping on its customers has legs. The Gothamist broke the story, and several local news outlets were followed with stories that largely quoted store flax as refusing to say whether facial recognition technology is deployed in Western New York as it is in New York City. Our J. Dale Shoemaker did a deeper dive that documented the use of biometrics is just the tip of the iceberg. Investigative Post has found that Wegmans is tracking and collecting data on customers from the moment they enter the parking lot to the moment they check out. Big Brother kind of stuff. This past week, the Buffalo News published an editorial taking Wegmans to task. CNN did a story as well. Wrote the news, "This is not okay, Wegmans. Nobody expects to walk into a grocery store and be subjected to biometric scans of their eyes, other facial features, and voice. Retail customers have long been aware that cameras and other traditional security measures are used to make sure patrons aren't shoplifting. But this kind of surveillance is something altogether different." This is what CNN had to say. Wegmans is just one of many big U.S. retailers that now use facial recognition technology, often without customers' direct knowledge. Walmart, Kroger, and Home Depot rely on it, according to their privacy policies, to name a few. Neither the news nor CNN touched on the other invasive practices that Wegmans deploys that Investigative Post reported. In other consumer news, Samantha Chrisman reported on the long lines Walgreens customers are encountering locally since Rite Aid pharmacies closed last fall. In her report to the Buffalo News, she wrote, "A recent visit to a store on Delaware Avenue and Sheridan Drive in the town of Tonawanda revealed a gaggle of unhappy customers. The pharmacy's drive-through was filled with idling cars. The in-store pharmacy lineup snaked along the back of the store, and with the waiting area filled, customers milled around the store while they waited for their prescriptions to be ready. I can relate. Long lines at the Walgreens store I patronize in North Buffalo prompted me to switch the balance of my prescriptions to a mail-order pharmacy service." The United States as a whole has more than made up for jobs lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here in Western New York, we're still short 3,200 jobs. The Buffalo News reports, if our recovery mirrored what's happened nationally, we would have added 27,300 jobs. Buffalo joins a growing list of cities declaring their police and other employees won't work with ICE and other enforcement agencies except under certain conditions. That means city employees cannot inquire about a person's immigration status while administering a city service, provide access to databases or other records to civil immigration authorities that are not already public. They cannot make facilities available to immigration authorities that aren't otherwise made public spaces. They cannot participate in the enforcement of federal civil immigration enforcement. The order explicitly bars the city from participating in immigration and custom enforcement law enforcement cooperation program known as 287G. It also directs heads of city departments, agencies, and commissions to inform the mayor if they receive a request for immigration information from a federal agency. The order does not cover federal criminal immigration enforcement, meaning police and city employees will comply with authorities if presented with a judicial warrant. Under the Trump administration to date, the majority of migrants arrested have been accused of civil violations, federal data shows. The majority of ICE detainees, too, have no criminal record or charges. We have an unaccountable federal police force that's terrorizing U.S. cities and U.S. citizens, Ryan said Monday of ICE, Border Patrol, and other federal agencies that have deployed in cities from Los Angeles to Portland, Maine. It's time for the federal government to put a stop to it. For now, we're controlling in the city of Buffalo what we can control. Ryan also voiced support for state legislation known as New York for All, which would prohibit cooperation with federal immigration authorities statewide and nullify 287G agreements municipalities may have with ICE. I think it's important to have a statewide approach so every municipality in New York State has a uniform approach, he said. The executive order adds Buffalo to a growing list of cities and states that are barring police and other public employees from working with ICE and other federal immigration agencies. In New York, Rochester, Syracuse, and New York City, they have all passed sanctuary city laws or put similar laws in place to bar such cooperation. Other cities, including Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco, have similarly put non-cooperation measures in place. The Trump administration, in turn, has said it will target those cities. An April executive order mandated the Attorney General create a list of so-called sanctuary cities and notify them that they are in defiance of federal immigration law enforcement. The order further stated that cities on the AG's list could have federal funds or contracts canceled. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post. We read from the Investigative Post on Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Elizabeth Ortel. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. Radio Reading volunteers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books to area blind and print handicapped persons who are provided reading radios. As always, please feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, and questions you may have. Our phone number here is area code 716-821-5555. Our agency website is nfradioreading.org. As always, as I mentioned, please feel free Please stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News is coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners